Hello everyone, welcome back to Silla's Pocats, welcome to Silla's Pocats, and welcome to a little update, I would say, on what June has been doing for me so far. Apart from the fact that I haven't really been filming a whole lot in recent months, I've also really gotten out of habit trying to film a wrap-up of sorts, simply because I tend to read a lot, and every single time I try to refrain myself from talking overly much about the books that I have read, I end up not succeeding, so wrap-up videos are like 50 minutes long, and I thought maybe we could do something different this time and could just do like 2 or 3 videos over the course of June to see how things went, so you don't have to sit through like 45 minutes of me rambling. So, in order to cut myself short, let's talk about the books that I've read in June, and you can try and guess how many of those were from my TBR, because I can tell you it wasn't a whole lot. Well, no, that's actually not true. I think a couple of these were from my TBR, but before we continue with the rambling, let me go get the books. Alright, I'm gonna start with the one that I don't have with me right now, because otherwise I am going to forget that it exists and that it was a thing. And that was an audiobook that I got via Libby, which is How to Get a Girlfriend When You're a Terrifying Monster by Mari Cardno. This is the first book in the Monster Girlfriend series, and I think they're all around the same sort of place that we are. It's a very short audiobook. We're talking less than 3 hours, and I listened to it while I was at work cleaning something. It was great. This is a very light-hearted, fun, sapphic adventure. We are talking about a scientist who discovers a portal into like a terrifying void of which monsters crawl out, and we have a monster who has seen humans do this, but also kind of sort of maybe falls in love with the scientist that she encounters here. It does a fun little play on like when to find something terrifying. For instance, while they are in this inexplicable void of nothingness and also everything. I do believe it is also called the Void, capital V, of course. While they are in the void, our female scientist does not fear the monster, but the second they are back in her world, she starts screaming because her hopefully soon-to-be girlfriend essentially portrays all these like inexplicable Call of Cthulhuian horrors that, you know, you cannot comprehend when you look at them, but they scare you nevertheless. I thought it was very cute. It didn't delve like super deeply into any topics, so to me this was honestly just a little refreshing read. I thought it was really adorable. I liked the characters and I liked how they worked together. I'm not the biggest fan of Insta attraction, which this kind of fell into, so if that's not your thing, maybe don't consider picking this one up. But if you want a cute monster romance with an actual monster, that one. That would in fact be the one. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about current reads. So these are 4 books that I'm currently sort of in the middle of. I think one of them I've dragged over from May and I wasn't in the mood to finish it, and the other 3 I've started this month. So first off, we have Itch by Gemma Amo. This is a horror thriller kind of situation where our main character Josie stumbles upon a body of a woman that is currently decomposing and infested with ants, as the cover might suggest. And she starts falling into this like almost psychosis-like state of hallucinating the ants everywhere in her body and feeling like super itchy, which is where the title comes from, and infested with them. And we are sort of going down the route of like maybe this was a serial killer and maybe he's also looking for other victims, and maybe Josie might or might not be on the list. We don't yet fully know. There's some supernatural vibes to this as well. With the creature, or like the potential serial killer, being described more like a cryptid or a creature than like a human being. We don't yet know. I am about halfway into it. I do want to pick this back up again. I've just been really intrigued by everything else on my TBR, so I kind of neglected it, and I do feel a bit sorry about this. But so far, it has been a decent enough ride. Not necessarily a book where I would say this is an absolute masterpiece, but I have had my fun with it, definitely. Number 2, let's just go sort of in order of when I started them. Number 2, we're back in the weird horrifying vibes, we have Brainworms by Alison Rumfitt. This is my first time reading the author. Her first book was Tell Me I'm Worthless, and both Tell Me I'm Worthless and Brainworms have incredibly mixed reviews. And I love books with mixed reviews because I will either, like, there's exactly 3 ways it can go. Number 1 is I can recognize that it's great but it's not for me. Number 2 is I fucking love it even though it is disturbing and depraved. And number 3 is I either don't care or I loathe it with a passion. And I like these things. I love mixed bag books. I am not exactly halfway, I think a good third into this. It is disturbing. The general setting, and I think I've also said this in my TBR video because this is actually from my TBR, everyone clap, please and thank you. But the general setting is that we have a trans woman named Frankie as one of our main characters, and her workplace gets bombed by a TERF. So this talks a lot about TERFism, specifically in the UK, talks a lot about transphobia, but also maybe about parasites infesting you and making you pregnant. Yeah, there's a lot of sexual content in here, some of which is very kinky, some of which is very fetishy. There's a very thin line between these two in this book, and sometimes the line does not exist and we play skip rope with it. So I would recommend looking up triggers before you get into this. Personally, this is my thing. I do have to read other happier books while getting into this, but it is really good. I am enjoying it. It is exactly as disturbing as I was hoping it was going to be. Number 2 is a lot happier, and this is actually a book I might have bought for myself in June, and technically it's not queer, but it does have a lot of queer authors and a lot of characters using neopronouns or in general being some aspect of queerness. So to me personally it counts, to Storygraph apparently it does not. It is what it is. This is an anthology called Zu den Wurzeln eine Plantologie. I love the pun, a plantology, because it's an anthology about plants. The bigger title would be translated as Back to the Roots. And this is all about plant punk, as it likes to call itself. It's all about imagining better futures for ourselves, centered around plants, around agriculture, around being able to make plants grow in an environment they might not be suited for because of climate catastrophe, or I think one of them is set on Mars, for example. I really like the collection so far. I'm a bit less than halfway into it as well. There's 15 stories in here. I don't know in which story I currently am. Could not tell you, but I'm about halfway through, a bit less than that. So I'm really enjoying this. As per usual with short story collections, some stories are better than others, or you know, you like better than others. So far, however, I will say I think I've at least enjoyed every single story in here, which is a very good sign, because sometimes you also read short story collections and some of them just make you go, no, not this one. So I am very excited to continue. I might continue this evening and try and see if I can finish it, but we will see. And last but certainly not least, and this one I do really want to finish today still because I have 50 pages left, I think, we have Person Unlimited, An Ode to My Black Queer Body by Dean Atta. This is also a pre-order or order that was not immediately available to me, that has arrived in June now. This is a memoir by Dean Atta. I've read something by Dean Atta previously, which was The Black Flamingo. That one is more so fiction, but it does take parts of his identity as a black queer man, and also specifically as a black queer man who is into drag and has performed drag as well. I really like this. This is a collection of short ideas, short memories that he's had, short experiences that have formed his identity. He talks about trauma, specifically he talks about recovering from rape. He talks about his relationship with sex and sexuality. He talks about how he found acceptance, but also how later on he found that some of the acceptance veered a lot into fetishizing black, queer, and also just black bodies. It's a really, really interesting memoir in my opinion. I have been a little bit on a trip for memoirs. I've read or have collected a couple actually, even though previously I used to say I'm not a memoir person. But you know, sometimes you just get proven wrong, and that's okay. If you want to start anywhere with Dean Atta, I would say this one or The Black Flamingo are actually really great ways to start. The Black Flamingo, like I said, is geared towards a younger audience. but it is still a phenomenal read, and it has some really beautiful illustrations. This one is straightforward text, but you know, I still really like this, and I can recommend this to people who are interested specifically in learning more about the Black queer experience. And now, let's talk about the books I did in fact manage to finish in June. Haha, do you see now why one singular wrap-up video is just not going to cut it for me usually? Anyway, I'm gonna start with the two that are technically not classified as queer on Storygraph and in a lot of places as well, but that I personally would say are at least some aspect of queer. So first and foremost, for university, I read Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. This is one of his comedies, and it was actually one of the comedies I had never heard of previously, so I was quite intrigued to get into this. The reason I would say this is incredibly queer is because our main character, Viola, cross-dresses as a eunuch for approximately most of the play, excluding the last act and the first scene in which we find her, where she makes the plan of cross-dressing as a eunuch. There's a lot of play on words and a lot of play with relationships in regards to who Viola encounters while pretending to be a eunuch. She falls in love with her male, well, the person she works for, essentially. He's a count, I believe. I don't fully remember all the details because there's a lot of people in here, but she falls in love with him, which is technically not okay because she's currently posing as a man. The woman she's supposed to woo for her employer falls in love with her, which technically is also not okay because while she is posing as a man, she is not in fact a man, and there's a lot of scenes like this. So I would say this is very queer. Apparently Storygraph disagrees. Alright, whatever, I guess. I'm gonna be working with this for a seminar paper as well, very likely, so I'm quite excited to keep diving into this. But as a first read, this was just a lot of fun, as per usual with Shakespeare and his comedies. And the last book that, like I said, is classified as not queer, where there's definitely queer elements to it, is The Girl with a Thousand Faces by Sun Yee-din. This is set in Kowloon, which was a very closed-off, a walled city in Hong Kong, and we follow Mercy Chan, who is in her 50s and who is an experienced ghost talker, not exorcist, but ghost talker, and it follows her journey as well as dives deeper into her past, and also specifically the past surrounding Hong Kong and its various attempts of being colonized, essentially. It talks a lot about violence, forgiving violence, trying to let go of your grudges, while employing essentially the guise of ghosts, so to speak, because especially in Chinese fashion, ghosts are usually women who have been wronged in some way or who have been killed very violently or who just cannot rest for whatever reason. And this book really takes that to the max. We have a lot of really unhinged women in this one, so I quite enjoyed that. I will say I didn't enjoy it quite as much as The Book Eaters, which was Sun Yee-din's debut, if I remember correctly. I had some issues with the writing style specifically, which I think was partially because it just didn't mesh with my expectations of the text, as well as my expectations of Sun Yee-din. I'm almost excited to dive into this again at some point to just figure out if this was just like a momentary issue on my part, and whether or not this could be resolved if I ever pick it up again, essentially. Alright, are you guys ready? Let's go for all the queer books I read. This is 6 books. I think 4 of them are from my TBR, so I'm quite proud of that. The other 2 I might or might not have ordered, and that might or might not have arrived in June, so I might or might not have read them. So, you know what, let's just talk about those 2 first, why don't we? So the first one is Prism by Katarina Ushatov. This is again a German short book. Essentially this is under 200 pages. We are at 172 pages. This is a dystopia novel about this kind of technology that is being developed so people can put dead people's consciousness into this piece of technology and figure out how or why they have been killed. as per usual with technology like this, it completely backfires on just about everyone involved, and there's a lot of twists and turns in this that essentially are there to kind of showcase how horrendous technology like this can become if there is no morality to keep it in check. I enjoyed my time with this. I really liked the central polyamorous queer relationship that we have in here. I thought that some of the plot points were a little bit underdeveloped, which might be because of the length and might also be because of something else. What I really enjoyed, and I don't know if you can fully see this, the chapters are really short and they are all grouped by color, which obviously corresponds to Prism, which is what this technology is being called. And within the story, we also have someone consistently talking in the colors, whereas we are basically being led to fully conceptualize the color first before anything. So the first part is about green, for example. So we start with jade. We also start the next chapter with basically saying that the meadow in front of the campus was incredibly green. So there's always this color correspondence within the chapters that I really liked, because I really enjoyed how the author managed to weave that together and make the color the central thing of her writing. I thought that was really interesting and incredibly well done. So I had a great time with this. If you speak German, consider grabbing yourself a copy of Prism. I got this from Ohne Ohren again. This is a publisher that I have supported in the past, so I will just be popping the link down below, so you can just order yourself a tiny little copy of a dystopia queer novel. And the second one that I received in June, and that immediately made it on the TBR because I really wanted to read it, was Her Pretty Night by Maria Ray Birch. This is the first book in the Sapphic Lady Knights series. All of them are standalone novels, so like they kind of reminded me of the Paladin series by T. Kingfisher. I don't know how interconnected they are yet because I don't have the other ones, and I am very, I feel very brave for holding out on them. Okay, so everyone clap again. I will just be wishing for all three of them for my birthday next month because I deserve it. I had a fantastic time with this. So in this story, we have a dual POV romance, essentially. We have Sir Gallion, who is beholden to a prince. She is incredibly loyal because of course she is. Listen, I love me my loyal knights who for some reason or other either consistently express their love through loyalty or just consistently are in conflict between their love and their loyalty. I eat it up every single time. I don't even care if the storylines are similar. I love it. It's one of my favorite tropes. But we have Sir Gallion, who is beholden to a prince who is now supposed to be marrying a princess named Cordelia. However, Cordelia really doesn't fucking want to marry him. So instead she sends a witch called Della over to pretend to be her because they look rather similar and fetching. So Della as a witch, they're not supposed to be witches, witchcraft is evil and bad and so on and so forth. Della as a witch in disguise to try and portray Cordelia to the princess to the prince is off to the prince and obviously gets assigned a guard by the prince. We all know where this is going. Sir Gallion is told to protect Princess Cordelia with her life. There's a lots of ups and downs in this. I really, really enjoyed it. This was just so refreshing to read. I used to think of myself as someone who doesn't really like romance, and apparently, no, I just need to find authors I click with, and me and Maria Ray Birch clicked immediately. I really enjoyed the writing style. I thought it was it added some flourishing touches to the characters. I loved the character dynamic. It has some sex scenes in them, but they were written so incredibly well. The dynamic between the characters shines in the sex scenes as well, which I'm a big fan of because I don't like when we just put a sex scene there because it's supposed to be a sex scene here. I really like it when it corresponds to the characters and how they feel about each other and how they work with each other. Chef's kiss. I really liked this one. I guess the only tiny complaint I had is that the ending wrapped up a bit too neatly. I understand that we needed a happy ending, and I did enjoy how we got there, but I thought the ending had a couple too few pages for itself to like satisfactorily wrap itself up. Beyond that, no complaints. This was made for me in the Scylla factory, for me only. I recommend this to everyone who likes knights. Here, this one, please. It's so fun. Alright, let's try and do this a bit quicker. Okay, so next we have one that I'm a bit unsure about. This is a literary fiction, and it is called Roses in the Mouth of a Lion by Bushra Rehman. This is set in, what's it called? Corona Queens in, I think, the 80s. What is it, 85? Yes, we begin in 1985 and then we continue on for a couple of years, and we mainly follow Rasia, who grows up in a Pakistani family in America within her relatively small community of fellow Pakistanis and also fellow Muslims, some of which are not from Pakistan, and we essentially follow her growing up journey, including but not limited to discovering that she is in fact very much queer, even though she doesn't really have a word for that, which then obviously leads to the rather inevitable question of, should we choose our love interest or should we choose our family? I quite liked how nuanced this book was trying to be about what it was depicting. I really enjoyed that you could definitely feel the comfort in being in community with other families just like yours, while also feeling that the said comfort is stifling you to some extent. I really enjoyed how careful Bushra Rehman was at just depicting all of this, and not trying to make the family out to be the villain, for instance, but also very much pointing to issues that existed within that community. How, for instance, the girls were all considered to be perfectly marriageable material for Pakistani men still in Pakistan who were coming over to the US to marry someone with a green card, right? I will say, I don't understand why this is classified as adult. I think this is coming of age fiction because we start when Rasia is really young, and I think the oldest she is at some point is like 19 maybe. I'm a bit unsure why this is classified as adult fiction, to be fair. Maybe that's just a thing, TM. I'm not sure. And I will also say, and this is a pet peeve of mine, the back essentially tells you the entire story. Like, there is stuff on the back, in the description, that happens like 2/3 into the book. I don't like when that happens. I think this does a disservice to the story because it makes readers, including myself, think that whatever is there on the back is going to happen a lot sooner in the book than it does, and I think it creates false expectations. I'm not a huge fan of that. So if you are interested in this book, maybe don't read the back. Take my word for it, it's queer. There's a lot of explorations of sexuality, there's a lot of explorations of identity, and what it means to exist within the Pakistani community as well as in an American community, or if there is even any difference, all interspersed with a young girl coming of age and also discovering that she might or might not be incredibly queer. The writing was rather simple. I liked it in places because I thought it was very fitting, but overall it wasn't something super noteworthy to me, so there's not really any extra points for this. I do believe I gave this 3.5 stars because I do still think that the story itself and the nuanced struggles it depicts are very important to read about. It was just not my favorite of the bunch, is all I'm saying. Next, we have What the Actual Fuck Is Wrong With You, Ma'am? Heap Earthapod by Chloe Michelle Howard. This is the author of Sunburn, which I haven't read yet because I owned this one physically, and I was like, sure, why not? What the fuck? What? When I finished this book, I had to stare at the wall for like 5 minutes. I was distraught. Jesus Christ. Okay, so this is the story of 4 siblings who move from their original city and island to a different one, or village, I think is more apt. It is set in 1965, and we essentially follow these 4 siblings as well as one of their neighbors to try and see how they acclimate to this new place, and also what might or might not have happened in the past, because they insinuate that something terrifying has happened, but they never tell you what until the very end. we had 5 perspectives in this one. We had the 4 siblings, Tom, Jack, Anna, and Peggy, and we also had Betty, who was their neighborly woman of, I think she was in her 40s if I remember correctly. This was claustrophobic to read. Genuinely, if you have read Roses in the Mouth of a Lion and you're like, yeah, like we talk a lot about close-knit community in there and it was a little bit stifling, this is the extreme of that. This takes you by the throat and doesn't let you go. These siblings all try to fulfill roles in society that they cannot fulfill because of what happened in the past, because of the fact that they just don't fit in anywhere, because they are terrified of something in their past, and maybe also something in their future, and maybe also something that is currently happening. They are unable to communicate with anyone about this, partially because they want to keep it hidden, partially because one of them kept it hidden and now they think there's nothing else to do here, because if we now admit that there was something, everything is gonna fall apart. This terrified me. It was good. It was really good. It was terrifying, it was depressing, it was bleak. I felt like this book was burying me alive. I recommend this, but be careful. You know, get a therapist maybe after you're done with this. This was a lot. This was a lot. If Sunburn is anything like this book, I will read it. I will need clinical assistance afterwards, is my point, right? Like, what the fuck was that? Right, continuing on with, okay, what the hell? We have Stag Dance by Torrey Peters. I've read Torrey Peters previously. I read Detransition Baby and I really liked it. This is a collection of 4 stories, 3 of them short stories, 1 of them the titular Stag Dance, I would say, novella. It's the longest piece here. All of them are about the trans experience, about sexual experience, kinky and fetishy experiences, and I did really enjoy where all of them took us. So, for instance, we had The Masker, which was all about someone who likes wearing a little girl mask and likes looking like a little cheerleader, which essentially talked about like how far are you willing to go to fulfill your fetish? How much are you willing to go to have good sex, essentially, broken down to it. We also have Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, which is essentially set in a pandemic-like timeline where everyone, including cis people, needs injections, estrogen or testosterone, in order to fulfill their gender, because otherwise it's just not possible anymore. We have The Chaser, as the title suggests. Chaser is a title, or a derogatory title usually applied to people specifically going after trans individuals for their transness and not for them as people. The Chaser, ironically enough, was one of the, like, I think the characters were the youngest ones in all of this. They were teenagers to very young adults, which, considering the topic, was a choice, and I really loved the choice. And Stag Dance is all about a couple of woodfellas being stuck in the snowy mountain where they are supposed to be cutting down the wood, and their commanding officer, he had a title and I immediately forgot the title, but he essentially insinuates that they might be doing a stag dance, which means that some of them can pretend to be women and they can then get attention from the men, they can get wooed, they can get flirted with, essentially, and then danced in the end. And our main character chooses to become one of those stags, even though he is probably the largest man in camp and no one would ever consider him to be willing to take it up the ass, so to speak, right? And it talks, in my opinion, very much so about conception of queerness, specifically with bodies that don't seem to conform to what we would think someone who would either like to be a woman or who would like to be perceived as someone willing to bottom in a relationship like this should look like. And I really like, they are weird as fuck, these stories, but I really liked them. I don't know if I have a favorite. I really liked The Mask. I really did. And I did also very much like Stag Dance. I read some reviews that said they didn't like Stag Dance, so the titular story of this collection, because they said it was too long. I think it was perfectly fine, the length that it was, and I really liked the explorations of, like, the social dynamics that happened in this story. So, definitely a recommend from me. because this was really cool. And last but certainly not least, we're getting to my sci-fi read, which is Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis. This was really interesting because we have a lot of POVs. So we are set in this floating hotel, which is called the Grand Abayona Hotel. It is a starship essentially that is on a predestined course that takes on a lot of guests. It gave me like Titanic vibes, simply with the whole of like, here's a floating ship in space and it has the most extravagant places. There's crystal everywhere and it looks fantastic. And we essentially explored the hotel as well as an underlying storyline of resistance against an imperial regime, through the perspective of people working on the ship as well as people being on the ship, so as guests or pretending to be guests and being something rather different. I really liked the different POVs. Yes, it was a lot, and I will say if you are not a fan of like many POVs, this is definitely not the book for you, but I loved how they meshed with each other, and I thought they all illuminated different parts of the hotel as well as their living experiences that I personally thought were incredibly engaging to read and listen about. And I also really liked how well this book kept the balance between giving us personal backstories to the characters that we were looking at, while also weaving in a story about resistance and trying to figure out who might or might not be part of the resistance, who might or might not be on this ship. And I was honestly impressed with how well Grace Curtis managed to combine these storylines to something that, in my opinion, flowed incredibly well. I really liked this. It was very lighthearted in places, and then towards the second half, give or take, we got a lot darker. Like, a lot darker. So don't let yourself be fooled by the very graceful and like beautiful entry that this book gives you, but I really liked this. This was one of my favorite reads so far in June, and I am incredibly excited because I have another book by the author that I also put on my TBR in case you might or might not remember. So this is a great sign that I am hopefully going to have a wonderful time with that book as well. I really hope so. I am in dire need of books being really good for me, okay? That's all I'm saying. Right, we're done. So to sort of try and recap, I think if I myself remember correctly, because I sometimes cannot tell you, but I do believe that out of the TBR that I set for myself, we read a whopping... Well, these are started, but we read a whopping 5 books. There we go. 5 books. One of which I didn't hold into the camera, I don't think, in my video, but I was always planning to read Twelfth Night in June. And I've started 2 more, or I am in the middle of 2 more from my physical TBR that I had in May still. And I do believe the other ones were new additions to the TBR, but most of them were pre-orders or books that I always intended to get that I just didn't have with me yet, so I didn't put them on my TBR video. So, I would say this is a success. You could tell me in the comments down below if you think it was. You can also tell me in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, and if so, what you thought about them, because I'm always interested in hearing other people's opinions on these books. And or whether you now consider to pick 1 or 2 of them up. Just let me know in the comments down below. I hope that you are having a nice reading experience in June. Tell me about the queer books that you're reading in the comments. And I hope that you continue having a nice reading experience, and I will see you soon.